Hello friends, it's Simone. Today I would like to do my fountain pens, my year in fountain pens 2023. It's the end of November and nothing is going to change drastically anymore. I might add one more pen. I will figure that out really soon, but this is how it went. I'm going to talk about stats first, and then I will talk a little bit about my currently inked journals, my actual ink journals and all that, and how I'm struggling or not struggling with those. But before that, I'm trying to just talk stats. So let's talk pen stats first. I started the year 2023 with 34 fountain pens, and I ended it with 40. The one of those 40 pens that I have in my collection is currently on loan with someone else. So I currently have 39 pens that I actually own in my collection. Why I stress that, I will talk about in a second. So the number of pens that came in 2023 is actually a really fun number. It's 23 pens. Plus 6 pens, no, actually 7. So that must have been a wrong thing. 7 pens that were given to me on loan. I have returned 3 of them. One of them I sold for the person who loaned it to me, and the other 3 that were given to me on loan in August 2023, I still have in my possession. Of the 23 pens that came into my house that were added to my collection, 17 of those I actually purchased. 5 of those I was gifted or won. I won them. One of them was swapped and one of them was sold. So this Bennu talisman really only stayed for about 1.5 months. One of the pens was swapped, and as I said, 5 of them were presents or I won them in a giveaway. I also would like to add that I am an affiliate with Atlas Stationers. So many of these purchases were made possible because I received affiliate payout. In the beginning, I was able to just use a coupon from Atlas, and then that was basically fixed money that I was supposed to spend on fountain pens. And then later on, it was an actual payout, and that's when the Atlas purchasing basically not stopped, but came to a halt, because instead of a gift card for a stationery store, now the money was in my PayPal account and my bank account, and I really thought twice or thrice about if I really wanted to buy a pen. I purchased, for instance, and I totally forgot to turn it on, this new camera rig with a ring light from that affiliate money, and did not put it back into fountain pens, for instance. So 23 pens came into my house in 2023, plus 6 on loan. 3 of them were returned, 1 of them was sold, and 3 are still here. Now, pens that left my house in 2023 were 15 in total. 13 of those I sold. 1 of them I swapped. So I gave one away, got one in return. I also sold 1 nib, but I didn't count that into the pens. And then I also gifted 1 pen. I also retired 2 of the pens in my collection in 2023. I retired the Pelicano Junior that my son used as a beginner fountain pen in elementary school in September, and I retired the Lamy Safari in yellow with a black medium nib in October. Currently, I'm thinking of letting go 4 pens that are still in my collection. 2 of those are TWSBIs and 2 of those are Gin House. Because I've been very generously gifted some amazing pens in the last year, even though they're not super expensive, I'm actually not thinking of selling them. I'm thinking of giving them away to someone who would like to use them. So that's something I'm currently thinking about. And then another thing that I didn't start out with one of the pens, but I was able to loan or borrow this pen, the Esterbrook Esty in Honeycomb, from my friend Sarah in March of 2023. And I have since added 4 of those pens to my collection. So why did I do that? Because I really like the model, and I like that they have Jowo nibs, they have the inner cap mechanism, and so this is the pen model that I have the most of. I currently think that I am done with my collection. I think 4 is a nice number. I like the different colors, and yeah, so this is the pen model that I have most of. I do have 2 Platinum 3776s. So that's another pen model. They do have different nib sizes, just as the Esterbrook Estes also have different nib sizes. And then I do have 2 of the same Franklin Christoph model number 2. I do have multiple TWSBI Ecos. I do have 2 Lamy All-Stars. But and I do have 3, I forgot. I do have 3 of the same model in the Bennu Euphoria. I am currently not thinking of adding any more. Woohoo! That's not how it's supposed to be. Of adding any more same modeled pens to my collection. That might change over time, but this is what I currently have. The reason why I like the Esty so much, and also the Franklin Christoph, I will talk about that when we get to the nibs, but that's basically how my collection currently is. Now, the pen that was inked the most in 2023 is, this is the second one, the Pilot Custom 74 in Burgundy. Let me just put something right here so I can find it really quickly. And both pens that were inked the most in 2023 are actually inked right now. So the Pilot Custom 74 in Burgundy with a medium 14 karat gold nib. This is one of the oldest pens in my collection right now. It's definitely the longest, more expensive pen that I have in my collection. And the reason I think why this was inked so much, and I can show you how many times. I inked it in January with Ancient Copper, Winter Spice in February. March it was inked with Wearingool Heart. This is not the right, this was a mix that I was able to snag from a friend. It was inked with Robert Oster Tea Time, Wearingool Wayfarer, Colorverse Cat, and then now it is inked with Ferris Wheel Press Atlas Iron Ore. The reason why I inked this pen up so much is because I have found this to be the most reliable writer. I can put in any kind of ink and it just writes. I found it to be an amazing pen for shimmer inks. And so every time I have a shimmer ink and I want to use it and I don't really know where to put it, this is the pen of choice that I put it in. I really prefer this even over the TÜSB Ecos. So that's why this was inked 7 times in 2023. This one, the Lamy 2000, was inked 4 times in 2023. I inked it in February with Ferris Wheel Press Little Robinia, then KWZ Grapefruit in March, Califolio and Renople in September, and then at the end of September I inked it with Diamine Deep Magenta, and it is still inked. I think the reason why I inked this pen so much was because I purchased this originally with an extra fine nib, and I was expecting to like this more than I was. And so I tried various different inks in this pen in order to figure out if it was the ink that I didn't like or if it was just the nib. And then when I was able to try Kristen from Life Inspires Design gold nib, fine nib for this pen, I fell completely in love with this pen. The fine is the correct nib size for me. It's just so wet, so smooth, so amazing to write with. And so I just don't really want to unink this pen anymore. Yeah, so that's how my pen quest went. I had actually one pen that wasn't inked at all in 2023, and that was the Pilot Metropolitan Retro Prop Red. I purchased that pen for the calligraphy medium nib, and I actually decided about 2 weeks ago that I was just going to harvest the nib, because I do have another Pilot that this nib will fit on. It's the Pilot Kakuno. And actually just threw the pen away, because I do not want to swap out the fine nib. I just want to keep that nib and try this again on this. So yeah, I haven't really trashed. Oh yeah, I trashed another pen that I never really talked about anywhere. My friend Katharina from Germany sent me a Jinhao 4X450, I think it was called, and it had one of those bouncy nibs that you would put on, usually put them on a dip nib holder. And the interesting thing about that was that I was not able to clean it. It was glued shut, the feed, and so I didn't really know what else to do with it, and so that one I trashed as well. So first time in my life this year that I actually trashed 2 pens. Okay, so I am going to close this, and maybe I'll grab this here, because this is all the inks that I haven't swatched in 2023 yet. So I am going to talk about inks now. I increased my ink bottle count by almost 100%. I started the year with 26 ink bottles, and I now have 50. I am counting the Anderillium sample bottles as actual ink bottles. There are 15 milliliters in these bottles, and I think that's quite a fair amount of ink. So those I count as bottles and not as samples. I do count the Urban inks as well as the Diamine Inkvent samples as samples. So I increased those to 50. I started the year with 117 ink samples, and am ending the year with 214. Yep, that's a large number. I currently have 55 ink samples that I haven't swatched so far. For some reason, this summer in July and August, I acquired through pen friends so many ink samples that I'm still swatching them. I'm usually swatching 7 inks at a time, film a video about it, and I enjoy doing that, and so I'm not going to rush this. These are going to be swatched at some point in the future, and then I'm going to be open to receiving more inks from friends. I really have changed my view a little bit on how overwhelmed I feel with these samples. I enjoy swatching them, and I feel like when I swatched them and I enjoyed them in that way, and I really enjoy that process, then I have already done enough duty towards this ink, and I do not feel obligated to keep that ink. I don't feel obligated to put that ink into a fountain pen. None of those. And I know I could do art with those, but I also have watercolors that I love using. And so what I'm going to just simply do is pass the ink samples along that I know that I will not put into fountain pens. There are definitely sometimes inks that I will pass along that I would probably love in a fountain pen, but that is just the risk that I'm going to take. I'm also not going to pressure myself into documenting all of the ink samples that I receive in any of my ink journals. Whatever is going to get put into those is fine, and whatever isn't is okay too. So I'm not going to stress about the fact that I'm passing along an ink that I haven't done a chromatography about, that I haven't put into this ink journal, that I haven't ink explored. None of this is really important. None of this is going to, I don't have to have a complete catalog of all the inks that are out there. I just do these things because they're fun. So the last thing that I want to talk about is nibs, and I don't really have a lot of stats about those because I feel like I just started dabbling in those, and now I have to bring out all of those fountain pens again. I have, let's count. I'm counting these two. I have, and maybe if we want to count the Lamy nibs, then okay. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 nibs that I consider specialty nibs. If we count in the Nemesine 0.6 stub nib as well as the CM nib, then I think I should also include the stub nibs from TWSBI and Lamy. So I think I'm going to take those away because I don't feel like a stub nib is a specialty nib grind. So not those. But these all have different nibs, specialty nibs that I like using. This one has a cursive smooth italic with an oblique nib, grind. That technically just means that instead of horizontal to the paper, it's at an angle like this. And so when you write with it, you don't have to hold your pen like this. You can tilt it a little bit over this way. And that's how I usually do this. I have found it really hard to start writing with this and have a good Schriftbild is the German word, penmanship. It feels less. It feels really hard to get a really good grip on how to hold the pen and the nib in order to get a nice writing sample. So this is basically technically my most difficult nib right now. I do have a medium SIG nib. That is the nib smith that nibmeister that did this grind was Kirk Spear of Penrealm. SIG nibs are a Franklin Christoph specialty, and they are ground by Audrey Madison. She's the wife of Mike of Ink Dependence. Then I have this journaler nib, and this is specialty that you can actually purchase on a fountain pen, ground directly. So getting this from your retailer or directly from Esterbrook. The nibmeister that made this journaler nib, which is basically also a cursive smooth italic, a stubby smooth nib, is Gina from Custom Nib Studios. So they made this nib. And then I also have another Esterbrook specialty nib, which is the Techo nib. And that is a take on a Naginata Togi grind by CY of Tokyo Station Pens. And I'm so annoyed by the misaligned feed right here. As you can clearly see, well, then I do have this nib. It is ground on a TWSBI nib, and this is a reverse architect nib also ground by Kirk Spear. And I also have this nib, which is the Schoen Monarch nib. I consider this a specialty grind as well. It's a titanium nib that is made from a rod, and it's an interesting nib to be sure. What you notice when you look at all of those specialty nibs is that these nibs are all removable. They're all JoWo number 6 nibs. And I said in the beginning that I was dabbling in those specialty nib grinds. I'm still feeling like I'm dipping my toes into the water of specialty nibs. And so I'm really scared of getting a grind on a pen that is where the nib is not as easily removable as it is with those JoWo number 6 nibs. So that is one of the reasons why I purchased so many different models of the Esterbrook SD, because I can swap around in theory, not in practice. That's something that I still need to work on. These two nibs are basically stuck on the pen, and I'm not sure if I really want to remove those nibs frequently, or if I'm just okay with leaving those nibs on the pens. But in theory, technically, all of the pens that take JoWo number 6 nibs, and those are quite a few that I have in my collection, can take any of those nibs. I could swap around all of them, and I do have quite a few. So all of these pens here, this one too, take JoWo number 6 nibs. So I could get additional nibs and have them ground by different nibmeisters and use them all on all of those pens. I could have 20 nibs and these kinds of pens and just switch and swap around and experience all of those nibs without having to purchase a pen. And if a nib doesn't really work for me, it's not the end of the world. I'm still very afraid of getting a nib ground, maybe getting this nib ground. This is such an expensive pen. I don't know how to remove the nib of this pen. And there are quite a few pens where I would be bummed if the nib grind for some reason just doesn't work out. And I feel like I have wasted a pen. I am actually, though, thinking about getting this nib. This is a broad platinum 3776 nib ground. So I'm slowly getting acquainted with the idea of getting nibs ground that are fixed on pens, but this is why I focus so much on getting pens that have a JoWo number 6 housing section, so I can switch and swap nibs around. That gives me the what is that name? It gives me the braveness, that's not the word that I want to use, but it's close enough, to maybe get a grind that I'm not really sure about and get it on a nib that just a random JoWo nib, and then try it out. And if it doesn't work, I can pass the nib along. Yes, funds are damaged, but I still have the pen. So that's the nibs. I do want to mention one more thing about my pens. When I said about the ink pens that were inked the most, I also have one pen that is inked the longest. I have this inked all the time. I clean it sporadically. I used to have platinum carbon black in here, and I do really like platinum carbon black ink. The only thing that I am really not happy about is the fact that it just sticks to the nib. It feels kind of like nail polish, and you can see that here with this nib as well. It's kind of, there's still some residue that is because of the platinum carbon black, and if I take my nail to it and scratch along, it comes off. But if I rinse it and if I try to clean it with a pen cleaner, it doesn't come off. And so I'm currently using De Atramentis Document Black ink in here, and I think that's going to just be a staple ink that I have inked all the time. So that's all the stats about my pens. Now let's talk a little bit about the journals. I filled 2 journals, long form writing journals in 2023. This one is a Taroko shop notebook with 68 GSM Tomoe River paper. It was an okay experience. Some of the finer nibs and some of the drier inks just didn't really work on this paper. And yeah, it left me wanting something else. And so when that was finished, I moved into this. And this is a 013 insert from Midori Travels Notebooks. It has 128 pages. And yeah, I was also able to finish this one. This one took all of the pens that I used, all of the inks that I used well. It didn't work with some of the pens and inks, but I had problems with those pens and inks on other papers as well. It wasn't that it was just not really an enjoyable experience on this paper. If it was problematic, it was problematic everywhere. And here, sometimes that wasn't. Oops, I'm sorry, that wasn't the case here. I sometimes had a writing experience where I thought, this just doesn't feel right. And it worked really well on all the other papers. So I filled this one. I used this from January 1st to May 31st. And then I used this one from June 1st to October 22nd. And then on October, I don't know when, maybe 23rd, yes, I started this notebook, which is a Tsubame note. The paper is the same as the Tsubame ink collection cards, if you've heard of those. And that's how I actually found this notebook. I actually used the cards and thought that it felt really nice. And I started researching and figuring out if there was paper or notebooks that were made with the same paper. The paper that is used in here is called OK Fool's paper. I think it's very close to bank paper. All of my fountain pens write really well on this paper. There is some cut off pen tests here. I see shading. I haven't really used any sheening inks yet, so I don't know about that, but I just really enjoy this. I like that it is thicker paper, and I especially like the lined pages. I am not someone who enjoys blank paper, even though I used this one because I had it in my stash. And I'm also not someone who likes the tiny grids. My handwriting is just bigger, and this is how I enjoy writing with my fountain pens. My currently inked notebooks were a little bit of a shambles this year, especially starting around July or August, when I felt like this wasn't enough, and I wasn't sure if it was the size of the notebook, the things that I wrote down. I didn't like the way that I ranked the pens. I first used pluses, then I ranked the pens. In between, I think I also gave numbers. It just didn't feel like, I gave points, but what were the actual objective reasons behind that? I didn't really have any. And so I went to the ranking, and then I stopped the ranking. But when I have already looked through my currently inked journal for January, when I want to do another currently best of 2023 currently inked. And it was much harder to figure out which pen, after I stopped the ranking, to figure out which pens I really enjoyed and which I didn't. So I struggled a bit, and my first idea was to use an A6 notebook. I used this Hobonichi here to write a little bit more about each pen and ink pairing. But that, for some reason, I just didn't enjoy the fact that I was only able to really use one of the pages. I did use front and back during 30 Inks 30 days. That worked okay, but it just wasn't as enjoyable as I had hoped. When I do my currently inked videos, I often talk about my first impressions, and then I tell you about my long-term experience, and I wanted to write these things down instead of just saying them on video. And even though this was a nice experiment, I decided in the end to not start using this in 2024. But what am I going to use in 2024? So that's the struggle, and I think I've settled on these two. This will just be a snippet of my currently inked pens every month. Maybe I'll do one at the beginning of the month and one at the end of the month, so I can see what has changed, because that's where things started to go during 2023. In the beginning of 2023, I inked up a certain amount of pens. I left them inked until the end of the month. Then I switched it out, and then I did the same thing over and over again. It was quite static. And during this past year, it became more organic. And what I mean by this is I might ink up a pen and I might use it for a little bit, and I might realize, well, I actually do not really like how this writes. What is the problem? Is the problem the ink? Is the problem the pen? Is the ink the thing that I want to use? Do I need to find a different pen for the ink? Is the pen the thing that I want to use? Do I need to find a different ink for the pen? And then I would just go ahead and do that. Or I would say, this writes like this. I would really love to see how this ink performs in this pen. And then I would have the same pen, the same ink in two different pens, because I wanted to compare how this specific ink feels in that pen. And instead of waiting until the end of the month and allowing myself to do that only then, I just did it whenever. And so the currently inked at the beginning of the month is not the same currently inked at the end of the month. And That's just how this is going to go for me moving forward. I'm still thinking about, do I just tell you about, here is this, I inked this up at the beginning of the month. These are my first impressions. These I have had inked for multiple months. I love how this works, or this is just not it. And so that's where I'm struggling a little bit still, but I think this is the way that it is going to go. I have tried and looked at various different formats. I tried the Cosmo Air light paper a tiny bit, and I think I have come to a really good idea. Not sure yet. I only tried it a tiny bit on Aerofoil paper. I am not as opposed to Cosmo Air light paper as I was when I first experienced it. I have come to appreciate the attributes that this paper have quite a bit. And so I think what I'm going to do in 2024 is basically what I'm going to try with Inkvent 2023. And then at the end of the month, I will have a good picture of if the space is enough, if I like the way that I fill this in. And then I'll decide if I'm going to do this in 2024 as well. But the idea is to just write a tiny snippet of my first impression, leave some room for a second for the review for each pen, and write that right here. Maybe do some, write with the pen in block letters and then fill that in with my water brush so I see a little bit of chromatography thingy. And I already prepared all the pages for December, where I'm going to ink up one pen with each of the Inkvent inks each day. And I'm going to try that. And then in 2024, I'm not sure if I'm going to do an actual lineup of the pens. It would probably be fun. I don't know. Or if I'm just going to have, blocks of, here's the pen and ink combination. This is how this is the first impression. This is the review, and then move on to the next pen. Not sure yet, but this is the notebook. I think what was the actual real problem is the size of those smaller notebooks. I currently feel quite at home in these bigger A5 size, or even bigger, as I showed earlier, even bigger. This is B5 is my fountain pen log. And this is also one of those notebooks that I actually switched up in October or so. I took quite a long time to change this because I still had quite a lot of back pain with this, but I originally had a size notebook that was B6 slim, like this, and that's where my fountain pen log was, but I also felt very cramped, and so I decided to switch it all up, have it in a ring binder with removable pages. I will put this in the description box down below because I can highly recommend the binder as well as the paper. It's extremely fountain pen friendly, and yeah, I have a lot of space in this, and I'm loving it a lot. The last thing I do want to talk about is my ink journals, because I said before that I'm letting go of the expectations that I have to do certain things. I started this chromatography color family ink journal in maybe May of this year, so 2023, and I put a swatch here and made a chromatography strip for each of the colors. It was just so much fun to do this at the time, and when I was done, my expectation was that every ink that comes into my house would be cataloged here, but that is just not really doable for me. And it keeps me from actually swatching the inks because I feel like it's too much work. And as I said before, there is no requirement that I have to have cataloged all of these inks. When I'm feeling that I want to catalog, that I want to compare an ink with all of those, then I'll dive into this, maybe add 5, 6, 10, 20 inks to this journal, but it's not going to be an on-the-go thing. It's just whatever works at that given moment. And this is not something that whenever I'm feeling like I want to go back in here, that's when I actually will. So this was one of those journals that I did in April and May, and I might dive back in here. Then I think also in October, maybe in September, I really liked these, and they were inspired by, can't find it here, when I did the 30 inks 30 days, I did a swatch here, and I really loved how I was able to see all of the inks at one glance. And so I thought, I still have one of those left. Why don't I just repurpose it? I already put the grids, the dots on every page that I want to use. Like here. Well, this one is already used. Maybe I can show you this one. So I already put the grids everywhere, so it's really easy for me to add more. And I am not having the expectations at myself that every ink that comes into my house needs to go in here, but it is an awesome way to look at all of the different greens, all of the different yellow greens, all of these in one go. And so I did add these two here because I am giving them away. But yeah, so I didn't start the orange yet, and that's totally okay. Whenever I'm feeling I would love to add another page, then I'm going to dive into my ink bottles and into my ink samples, pull them all out, add 1 or 2 pages, and then that's it. This is something that I do because I enjoy it and not because I have to do it. And the same goes for these. This one I think I did almost all through the beginning of all through the first half of 2023. And what I did was I did an ink exploration for all the inks that I had inked in fountain pens, and that was a lot of fun, but also a lot of time, quite time consuming. And when I went to the San Francisco Pen Show, that kind of fizzled out, especially with 30 inks 30 days. There was no way I was going to be able to do this. And then I had a lot of pain in my neck. I wasn't able to write, so this was just also put on hold. And I did put away some inks that I would like to explore, like Krishna Chennai. That sample is in a special place, so when I am ready to dive back in here, it's there and I can actually do an ink exploration about this. Yeah, I think I am at the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. There's 2 interesting facts that I want to mention. The first one is of all the pens that came into my house in 2023, I sold 1 pen. And that was and I really want to do a video. I just don't really know how that's going to look like, because it's going to be a lot of legwork of finding all the images. That was the Benu Talisman Venus's Hair. I'm currently thinking about selling number 22, which is Sailor Pro Gear Slim Autumn Drizzle. This is one of the pens that I might sell. It's the one pen that is currently on loan with someone else. But I feel that by exploring all those pens and by researching and thinking about what do I like about a specific pen, is it the weight? Is it how it writes? Is it the nib size? What makes all of those pens work for me? Helped in buying only pens, with a few exceptions, of course. I'm still learning, still gaining more and more knowledge about what I like, what I don't like. I was able to add 90% of these pens that are working for me. So when I started this year, I was very much driven by keeping my collection really small and having a certain number of pens only. I did a video with Leanne where I talked about what the limit is. I was very rigid in my ideas and thoughts, and now I'm really more on the, if this is the size that my collection needs to be for me to be able to explore and enjoy all of these different nibs, nib sizes, pens, pen bodies, pen shapes, then that's just how it's going to be. I'm not in that mindset that I need to keep it small, that I need to feel guilty if I have more than a certain amount of pens. I completely drifted off that that mindset, and I don't feel guilty about owning any of the pens that I have in my collection right now. And I think if you have thoughts that you feel guilty that your collection is too big, maybe because I only have 40 pens right now, that's how I feel. It's not a huge number, and so maybe that adds to this. Maybe I would feel differently if it was 100 or 120. But as long as I love every pen, as long as I have a reason why a certain pen is in my collection, I am totally fine with the number that I have. And I think with that, I'm going to leave you. I hope this was interesting for you to watch. I hope if you have some of those thoughts, those guilty feelings, I was able to inspire you to let those feelings go. That's why I share all of this. These pens are joyful to use, to collect, to touch. The inks are fun to swatch, to use for art, to just have them in your collection, swatch them in different ways, use them in different ways, and that's what it's all about. It's not about feeling guilty or having to use everything in your collection. It is about the joy that all of these things bring to us. And yeah, again, with that, I'm going to leave you. I hope this is going to be a fun year, 2024. I have some pens on my list that are quite expensive, and so I don't think I'm going to do a lot of new pen day videos. There's one pen that I really want, and it's going to be released really soon, so maybe that's a birthday pen for me, who knows. But what I'm looking at in 2024 is more exploring, more ink swatch videos, because I just enjoy making those. I would like to share basically my thoughts after 2 years of owning this pen. I have a list of pens that I would like to share every month and dig a little deeper with those. And yeah, I am going to share lots of over analyses of all the things, and that's what I'm known for, and so why should I not do that? I hope you are having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you soon. Bye.